Hello students, our today's topic is shading and reflection. The first thing before discussing the shading and reflection is what exactly is light and what is vision. Vision by a human eye is a complex system. So this complex system is possible only in the presence of light. So vision is a result of the complex interaction between our eye and brain in the presence of light. So the light received by the retina of eye, which contains rods and cones, and the cones are sensitive to high light levels, whereas the rods are sensitive to low level illumination. So these signals are then sent to our brain. The signal are then understood and interpreted by the brain, and information is received. So when light falls on an object, it can be reflected, absorbed, or transmitted. So in this topic we will discuss about these topics, that how light is reflected from one surface, and what are the various type of reflections, and what is shading. Shading is a model in a computer graphics that is used to simulate the effect of light shining on the surface. As we know, the reflection changes the saturation on the surface and this change is known as shading. So the intensity that we see on the surface depends upon the various things, that what kind of light source is this, from where the light is emitted, the surface characteristics of where the light has fallen, whether the surface is shining, whether the surface is made, whether it is dull, transparent, or opaque, what kind of material it is. So the shading of surface depend upon two things. One is the source of light from which the light is emitted, and the second one is the surface where light falls. So type of illumination, light emitting source. So what are the various illumination models? First of the light emitting source, like light emitting source is light, bulb, sun. These are the light emitting source. So light emitting source are further categorized as two types of one is point source and another one is a distributed light source. Point source, when light source is far away from the object, like sun is far away from us. Sun is a source of light, moon is a source of light, stars are the moon source of light. So this kind of source is called point sources. And distributed light sources, when light source is large as compared to the object. So neon light is an example of a distributed light source. Reflection of ambient light. So light reflecting sources that we had already discussed. Two types of light reflecting sources are there, point and distributed. Multiple reflection of light from nearby object, that is ambient light. Ambient light has a uniform intensity in all direction. It causes a surface to be uniformly illuminated at any viewing position. So this type of light, ambient reflected light, has a light component which is non-directional and is exposed as a product of multiple reflections from the surroundings. So what I mean to say is, when a light falls on the surface or an object, it can be transmitted, it can be reflected, or it can be absorbed. So the three basic components of light are ambient, diffuse, and specular. So ambient reflected light has the light component which is non-directional and it is expressed as a product of multiple reflections from the surroundings. A point source light emits directional light rays. Normally we consider light rays from the distant light source as being parallel and light rays from the close light source being divergent. So two types of reflection of point source light is, one is the diffuse reflection and another one is a specular reflection. When light is reflected from a surface, it does not reflect all the light that enters a surface. Part of the energy will be absorbed by the surface. The reflection coefficient represents the amount of light reflected from the unit normal vector n represents the orientation of surface. The unit vector L represents the direction of light source. The angle of incident Q represents angle between N and L. So here in the first figure, light ray from the source of light, a light ray falls on the surface and it makes an angle theta with the surface normal. You can see in the diffuse reflection the surface is rough, and in specular reflection the surface is smooth. In specular type of reflection, each light ray of the beam of the light follows the law of reflection, that is, the ray of reflected light remain concentrated as a beam or a bundle while leaving the smooth surface. So in diffuse reflection, when these light rays are reflected from the surface, they scattered in different positions and different directions. So what is refraction of light? Refraction occurs when light travels through transparent or semi-transparent object of different densities, like from air to glass, from air to water, from water to air, from denser to rarer medium, from rarer to denser medium. Another is Gourand shading, and third one is Phong shading. Flat shading and Gourand shading are the shading method used for games console, whereas Phong shading is slightly different from these two. Flat shading method is not very realistic method, whereas other two methods are closer to realism. The Phong shading method is otherwise better than the density shading method, that is also called flat shading method. So this is one of the simplest and fastest polygon rendering or shading method is the constant intensity shading method. The model is also known by another name, that is flat shading. So this method is useful for immediately displaying the general appearance of curved surface. So constant intensity shading method, the intensity value for whole polygon is calculated once and whole polygon will be shaded with the same intensity value. So whole surface of the polygon, intensity for all the surfaces of the polygon is calculated at once, and that value is used to display and the whole polygon with for the shading with the same intensity value. So this method is fast and simple but cannot model specular reflection. Using this method, we determine the single intensity for the entire polygon. Then that intensity is used to display all the point over the entire surface. The major problem with the intensity discontinuity between the polygons. The light intensity is computed based on the normal of each polygon surface. Since different polygons have different normals, so the light intensity computed may be quite different for the different areas. Next one is a Gourand shading. So this method is named after its inventor who invented the shading technique, that's Gourand in 1970s. So this technique is also known as intensity interpolation scheme. So the intensity value is calculated once for each vertex of the polygon. So for every vertex we have to calculate intensity value first of all. Then that intensity value is linearly interpolated, polating the values of the intensity over the surface. So these intensity value of each and every polygon are then matched with the intensity value of the adjacent object or polygon along the common edge. So this eliminates the intensity discontinuities that occurs in the flat shading method. That was the disadvantage of that method, first flat shading. So that disadvantage or that drawback is overcome in this method. So it eliminates the intensity discontinuity problem, but still not very good for the specular reflection. The interpolation of the color values can cause bright or dark intensity streaks. that are called matte band to appear on the surface. So this is one of the disadvantage of Gorin shading method. So the intensity value is calculated based upon the normal factor here. So the Phong shading method otherwise contains a lot of calculation which are otherwise reduced in fast Phong shading method. That is the advanced method of the Phong shading method. So in crux we can say flat shading do not give the realistic image but shading method, but Gorin shading and Phong shading give the realistic look. Phong shading is expensive as compared to other two methods. Phong shading is complex as compared to other two methods. Phong shading is advanced method as compared to the other methods. So the drawbacks of the both methods are disappeared in Phong shading method. Thank you.